Thank you. So, welcome to the meeting on Wednesday, the 10th of July. Good morning, members, officers, and any members of the public joining us today. Welcome to this meeting of Cambridgeshire District Council Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I chair the committee, and my vice chair is Councillor Peter Fain. Those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you're deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archived recording. May I ask any who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. When I say close to you, it sort of needs to be about here. I'm advised that there will be a brief fire alarm test at 10:30, so we'll pause the meeting at that time and not leave the room unless the fire alarm continues continuously. For those of us in the chamber, please note that we do not leave the building during these tests. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known so that it can be recorded in the minutes? So, item 2 is apologies on our agenda. Lawrence, are there any apologies for absence today?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So 4 apologies today coming from Councillors Bill Handley, Jeff Harvey, Peter Sanford and Heather Williams, and Councillor Corin Garvey's kindly stepped in as sub today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And item 3 is declarations of interest. Do members have interests to declare in the item on the agenda? We only have one item of business. I see none. So if it becomes apparent during the discussion that you do have an interest, then please let us know at that point. So we come to item 4, which is a developer briefing on the design code for North Stowe Phase 3A, Key Phase 1. Members, before we move to item 4, I'd like to note that the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of June are not yet available. So we'll proceed to the developer briefing regarding North Stowe Phase 3A, Key Phase 1, Design Code. Members should be able to access the details of the outline consent granted in 2022, which is linked on the front page of our agendas. Before we start the briefing, I'd like to hand over to Vanessa Blaine, our senior planning lawyer, for some legal advice. Thank you, Vanessa.
Morning, everyone. Members, just a gentle reminder, please don't ask any leading questions or enter any sort of form of conversation, debate that from which an inference could be drawn that you're predetermined, biased, predisposed, or anything that could potentially damage any decision made at any future planning committee.
Thank you, Vanessa. Right, we'll now go to Luke Mills, who's responsible for this matter as principal planner within the strategic sites team. Luke, would you kindly outline the matter we're attending to today, and then we'll hand over to the developers for their presentation. So over to you, Luke.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the matter is a design code. So the design code relates to the first key phase within North Stowe Phase 3A and is the subject of ongoing pre-application discussion between Homes England and the local planning authority. It was agreed that Homes England would undertake an early stakeholder engagement exercise, which includes the briefing to members today, and will inform further discussions on the content of the code. A further round of engagement will take place later on in the project, which will culminate in the developer's submission of a formal application for approval of the code under Condition 14 of the Phase 3A Planning Permission. And then once that code is approved, its role, and this is the important bit, its role is then to guide future reserve matters applications for development on Phase 3A, Key Phase 1. So those detailed applications that you'll see in future will need to show compliance with the eventual code. Hope that helps.
Sorry, thank you very much, Luke. And you've completed your introduction. Thank you. So, can I just ask the various people who are going to kindly speak to us today to introduce themselves? I know I'll start with Dean Harris, who's from Homes England.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, councillors. I'm Dean Harris from Homes England. Homes England is the government's housing and regeneration agency. We are the public sector master developer for Northstowe phases 2 and 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, I'm Cathy O'Toole. I'm also Homes England Assistant Dean on Northstowe.
Thank you. And Amy?
I'm Katja Stille from Tibbles, and we have been supporting Homes England on planning and master planning on Northstowe.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Sweeting. I'm an urban designer, so I'm working for Tibbles on the master planning side of things.
Thank you very much. So, yes, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Some of us have becoming hard of hearing. I could barely hear them.
Yes, okay. I can see you've all got your microphones to one side. Can you bring them all closer to you so they're like this? Thank you very much. It means they're sitting on top of often your paperwork or your laptop, but we do want to hear what you're going to say, so thank you very much. And if anybody finds it difficult, do put your hand up and we'll address that. So, back to you, Dean Harris. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. We're really excited to be sharing our first output on the design code for Phase 3A Key Stage 1 with you. We obtained outline planning permission for this phase in March 2022 and are keen to demonstrate how this phase of 1,600 homes can be developed in a way that complements the earlier phases of Northstowe, but it's an opportunity to build on the best of what has gone before. Homes England has appointed Tibbles Planning and Urban Design to produce the design code for us. They produced the design code for Phase 2. They might not say this, I'll briefly mention it was an award-winning design code produced in collaboration with your officers. And we have been working with your officers for around 9 months to get to this stage. We're very grateful for the input we've received from Luke, Trevine and officers of the council. I'll pass over to Amy, if that's okay, Chair, to talk you through the presentation, explain how we got to this point, what a design code is and what the design principles are for this key phase, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Amy.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to present my screen. If you could just give me a moment. Great, okay. Well, thank you all for having us along today. I'm really excited to kind of update you on where we are with the design code. As Dean said, we've been working with the officers for the past few months to get to the point where we are now. And I'm going to run you through that in a moment. But before I do so, I'm just going to run through a bit of background information for you. So setting the context of Phase 3A, what's happened to date on Phase 3A, and how we've got to where we are now with the design code. So I'm sure you're very familiar with the maps you can see in front of you. The left-hand map obviously shows the strategic location of Northstowe to the northwest of Cambridge, and with Oakington to the south of it and Longstanton to the west. Got a slightly zoomed-in version of that map to the right-hand side, which shows the different phases of Northstowe. So you can see Phase 3A highlighted in orange there, it's the southernmost phase of the town. So it's got Phase 2 to the north of it, which will have the town centre within, and then Phase 1, which is almost completed further north of that still. As you can see in grey, the Southern Access Road West comes into Phase 3A from the southwest, as its name suggests. This has already been constructed and forms an important link through to Phase 2 and the facilities that already exist there, so the secondary school and the residential dwellings, as well as to Phase 1. You can see the Cambridgeshire guided busway there to the east, which is a really important opportunity for the town, and it's something that we'll be drawing on and linking into as part of our key Phase 1 work as well. So as Dean's mentioned, outline planning permission was granted a couple of years ago for Phase 3A, and attached to that are a set of parameter plans which have been approved, which essentially set the fixes for things like development extent, major movement routes, and the key areas of open space within the phase. Unfortunately, some of the colour seems to have been lost from the plans in the sharing process, but hopefully you can make out. Yeah, it's quite difficult, admittedly, compared to my screen from the thing, but there's the greyer kind of development.
Do you have
Sorry.
a pointer you can use to point to different, your cursor perhaps?
Yeah, my cursor's not showing on the screen, unfortunately. I'm waving it, but maybe if I go to a different plan, it might be, okay. I'll briefly dwell on this one, but I'll move on because I think it's clear on the second and third plans. But this is the open space plan, and hopefully you can see in the darker green, so to the south-east of the phase, for example, there's some retained military belt trees of planting which hail from the history of the site as an airfield. We've got the key areas of open space on here, including sports hubs, indicative locations for areas such as the neighbourhood park, and retained features including the lake to the southwest of the phase. I'll pick up on some of the other elements on this on the later plans because I think you can see them much more clearly. But these are two more of the plans that have been part of the outline planning application for the wider phase. So we've got the design principles plan on the left, and here you can see much more clearly the development extent in kind of the beige colour, and the open space, both which runs through the development block and also around the perimeter of it, so connecting into the wider open spaces. For example, the Phase 2 water park, which sits directly to the north of Phase 3A. On this plan, you should hopefully see it's red, but it's kind of browny dashed line and the blue line, and that is the location of key Phase 1. So it's within the northern part of Phase 3A. I do have a clearer plan in a minute for this, but just to give you some context of the bit that we'll be zooming in on in a minute for the design code. On this design principles plan, you can start to see some of the really key design aspirations that we had for this phase as a whole, one of which is the reflection of the former runway alignment, which runs roughly southwest to northeast on the plan. Yeah, it would be helpful if I had a pointer, but you can see the frontages. Okay, thank you.
If we can get to the point where you've got a laser pointer, I think that would be extremely helpful.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Great. Okay, now that we can all see what I'm talking about.
That's much more helpful.
Thank
so
you,
do you
Lauren.
just want to just show us the alignment again?
Yes. So this series of spaces that we've got on the principles plan reflects the former alignment of the runway. And the way that that's been reflected is, as I say, through a series of streets and spaces. So we've got the primary street coming in to the site from roughly the southern edge. This then diverts off and the space continues as an urban square in the form of the neighbourhood centre. We then move on to the neighbourhood park, which is a soft landscaped open space, which will incorporate opportunities for play and seating and leisure routes. And then it's terminated with the runway lake, which is a really exciting open space within Key Phase 1 and Phase 3A, which is a linear body of water, which will then connect into the Phase 2 water park. And this provides a really exciting opportunity for waterfront development and pedestrian and cycle routes as well. Excuse me. So moving on to the plan to the right, we can see the building heights parameter plan. The shaded area in red is a zone up to 5 stories, and that surrounds the neighbourhood centre and the neighbourhood park, so the real heart of the phase. We've also got an area of up to 4 stories along the runway lake, which is a really significant area of open space and quite large in its size, so really giving that space a sense of prominence and importance. And then we've also got the opportunity for up to 4 stories in key locations, so be it on key junctions or overlooking key spaces, as well as on the entrance to the phase from the south. There are areas of higher height overlooking the lake to the south, but that's outside of our key phase and something that we won't be discussing in detail today, but as part of the approval for phase 3A. So moving on to key phase 1, and we'll pick back up on some of those overarching design principles as we go through. As I said, it's the northern part of phase 3A, so it connects the southern entrance to the town really to the town centre, and it's got a really important role in that sense. What we're working on is a design code, and I'm sure you're all well aware of this, but just to set the scene, the design code will aim to set really clear design requirements for a high quality and well-designed place, so increasing certainty for the detailed design developers, DM officers and members. It will provide specific and detailed instructions that are measurable and numerical where possible, so really setting the benchmark for the design quality. And it will use direct and practical language with illustrations and precedent images to really display what the expectations are for the design quality within the phase. So Dean has already touched on a couple of these points, but just to reiterate, it will be a compact neighbourhood with really good access to open space. As I say, it's got a couple of really exciting opportunities within it, including the Runway Lake and the neighbourhood park. It will have around 1,600 homes at an average of 50 dwellings per hectare. And as we've already mentioned a couple of times, it will offer a really clear and exciting entrance to the town centre from the south. It's a predominantly residential development, but there will be smaller pockets of what we've termed flexible mixed-use zones. So in these zones, buildings will be designed to flex between different types of use, so can respond to future market changes and things like that, and they're not kind of static in what they'll be deemed to be. There's the bus-only route, which runs along the southern boundary there, connecting into the Cambridgeshire Guided Busway to the east and the town centre to the north within phase 2. As I've already mentioned, it's got the Runway Lake, which is, as I said, a really exciting asset, follows the alignment of the former runway and really celebrates Northstowe's history as a former airfield. So homes will be overlooking either side of this lake, and we've got some 3D sketches to show you in a minute, which will help bring that to life a little bit. As part of the design, we're looking at making sure that pedestrians and cyclists can move around the site really easily and can connect into the wider phases as well, so including routes along the guided busway, further into phase 3A, and also connecting into the established routes elsewhere, so within phase 2 and beyond. So looking at our key design principles for the phase, you can see the Urban Design Framework Plan in front of you, and this works within the parameters that have been approved as part of the outline planning application. So here we're starting to look at breaking that down into the next level of detail. So you can see here how we've started looking at different viewpoints, so from within the residential streets towards, for example, the Runway Lake, where we can see opportunities for retention of trees in the pocket spaces within the development blocks, so they're shown as the darker green circles here, and how we've started to break down kind of the hierarchy of open spaces. So we've got the neighbourhood park and Runway Lake, as I've already mentioned, looking at smaller community spaces, so be it the school square in front of the primary school there. Sorry, my laser keeps... And then also a series of spaces along this route, which is actually a reflection of a former historic lane as well. So bringing in kind of those real character drivers to the phase and drawing on what's already existed on the site. We've also started looking at how this is a really important entrance coming in from the west, from the east, from the Cambridgeshire Guided Busway, and how that creates a kind of a gateway entrance to the town for people travelling along from there. So as I say, we've got a series of open spaces within the key phase. So these are larger formal sports areas. So if I flip back to the plan, we've got a northern sports hub up there to the north, which adjoins the water park. And within there, there'll be netball and tennis courts. We've also got more smaller communal spaces within the residential block. So here I'm talking about these pockets of green, which will have much more of a community feel, serve the residents that are directly accessed off them, and are also located along key desire lines, so people who are moving through the site can enjoy them as well. I've touched on retained trees already, but as it says here, existing trees will be preserved and integrated where possible as key features within pocket spaces and within the development blocks and larger open spaces. So moving through some of the really important spaces within the phase, I'm just going to start off with the primary school square, which, just to put it into context, is number 3 on this plan, so you can see where it sits in terms of the wider key phase. We've got some dimensions on here, so 40 metres by 30 metres for the orange kind of suggested hard standing part of the space, just so you can get a sense of scale of what that might look like. And we have got a 3D in a minute to help visualise that further. We see this as a really important community meeting point, so it's the convergence of a number of pedestrian and cycle routes that move along key desire lines, so say connecting the primary school to the neighbourhood park, to the runway lake, to the formal sports areas. And we see this as accommodating both hard and soft landscaping. It's got some proposed retained trees which set the scene for a really nice green entrance to the school. It will provide the main entrance for students as well as a formal entrance, and most importantly perhaps it will be kept car free, so it's a really safe space for people to meet, chat after the school drop off, or just as a communal social space in general. There's also the opportunity for mixed use development to overlook this, so where you can see the hatched orange buildings to the north, there could be, for example, a cafe with spill out space, something really helping activating that space throughout the course of the day. So here's a 3D image of this. So you can see here the street kind of passes adjacent to the space, but cars aren't allowed through. We've got a pedestrian and cycle connection up through the historic lane there. And then shaded in orange is where I was talking about the potential for mixed use, say be it a cafe or otherwise, with potential spill out space into the square there. These larger trees are the potential retained trees, which really help frame the entrance into the main school building. And then across the road there, as I said, we've tried to align the cycle and pedestrian streets along really key desire lines. This leads towards the neighbourhood park and is designed at the moment as a play street, so it's a car-free space with opportunities for children to go out and play on their doorsteps without the presence of vehicles moving through there. So moving on to our next key space, we've got the neighbourhood park, which forms the heart of the neighbourhood and sits adjacent to the neighbourhood centre and also connects to the north to the runway lake. So again, within this park, we've looked at the potential for retaining existing trees, which you can see in this block to the south. There's the potential here for mixed use and commercial spaces at the northern and southern edges of the park, so again, hatched in orange at either end. And there'll also be a range of play and recreation areas, and it will be a hub for community activities, so, I don't know, film screenings during the summer or whatever it might be. This will be the main focus of kind of the larger community spaces within the phase. So bringing that to life a little bit, hopefully this will help you visualise our intentions for this a little bit more clearly. So as I say, these series of spaces are along the former runway alignment. You can see the runway lake in the distance, so it's a journey really through these different types of spaces and the different types of opportunities that they provide. We've got suggested play areas, the darker trees, which is slightly lost on the screen, but where my laser is the potential block of retained trees there as well. And we've started looking at how we could arrange the buildings to create a really interesting space that celebrates the former alignment, but also the direct cycle and pedestrian routes that link between other key destinations. So we've played around a little bit with, for example, rotating the buildings to really celebrate where those links are coming in, make them really clear, and really emphasising the movement of active travel and pedestrians and cyclists through the different spaces. So coming onto the runway lake, This is, as I said, a linear water body, and along its two edges we've got two very different kind of approaches. So we've got homes overlooking it on both sides of the lake. On the kind of the roughly eastern side, where my laser is now, the homes will sit quite closely to the waterfront. There'll be a pedestrian-only route along that edge, and then there'll be much wilder landscaping dropping down into the lake, which will be explained in an image that I'll show you in a second. On the other side, there'll be much more of a boulevard, kind of promenade approach, more formal planting, with homes set behind that street. So there'll be vehicular, pedestrian and cycle movement along that edge there. There's also the opportunity for a bridge, so pedestrian and cycle crossing, which will offer views along the water body as well, and a place for people to kind of stand and appreciate the open space there.
Sorry, Amy, can I just ask, on your diagrams, where you've got a purple dotted, does that mean a crossing?
Yes, sorry,
Okay,
I
that's
appreciate
fine.
the keys
That's
quite
fine.
important.
Just to understand.
Yes. Okay, so so the crossing you were just pointing at is this one here. So the orientation of this has been flipped slightly. So this direction is essentially south, leading towards Neighbourhood Park, and then this is north towards phase 2. So that was the crossing between the Runway Lake and the Neighbourhood Park. And then, as I was just discussing, so on the eastern side, we've got these homes providing this really lively and attractive waterfront edge there, so sitting close to the water's edge with kind of wilder planting and pedestrian-only link along that side. We've then got a street and a promenade with the opportunity for different types of planting, seating, places to just sit and appreciate the view on the other side. So two quite different approaches, but really celebrating the lake for what it is and giving people the opportunity to experience it in different ways. So moving around the site as a whole, we've got the bus-only link, which is the purple route that I'm highlighting there, which connects the Cambridgeshire Guided Busway to the town centre. And from this busway, there'll be a series of views offered, which really kind of highlight the main features of the phase. So the views will be looking into the Neighbourhood Park, towards the Runway Lake, and also towards the Neighbourhood Centre before continuing on to the town centre to the north. We've got the primary streets on here in a pink, which, is kind of the routes I'm highlighting there. And along this link, so the link that connects the primary school towards the Runway Lake and Neighbourhood Park, we've also got a greenway, which is essentially a linear open space alongside the street, within which there'll be footways, there'll be cycleways, and how they're integrated is something that we are hoping to discuss with you today. One of the design principles that was set in the outline planning permission is that there will be a connected cycle network within the phase with safe routes every 250 metres. So as if you were to draw a grid of 250 metres over the phase, there would be at least that many cycle routes connecting through the development parcels. And we have provided that through the provision of segregated paths along primary and secondary streets, car-free paths through open spaces, and also on-street routes, so where they're required to residential areas, for example, shared surface home zones. We've also got on here an indication of how the blocks might start to be broken down with lower grade streets, but this is illustrative at this stage, and it's not something that the code will be necessarily fixing. As I mentioned before, we've got the historic lane, which is the alignment runs there. And the way that we've celebrated this through the design is through a series of smaller communal spaces, kind of those sail shapes along its length. And we've also broken up the access along that street. So the green lines are pedestrian and cycle only. As you can see, it's not a direct route for cars. It's a much more direct route between the primary school and the water park for pedestrians and cyclists, whereas cars would have to divert off into the block. So it's really giving their priority along the route. The final point I want to make on movement is the provision of play streets, which are, as I said, car-free zones designed to create safe spaces for children to play. And we've tried to locate these along key desire lines and movement routes. So we've got them connecting the primary school to the Neighbourhood Park at the moment, and also between the two development blocks either side of the Runway Lake there. So they're shaded in kind of a light pink, and they widen the line. Hopefully you can see them on that plan. So we've just got some examples here of successful play streets, such as Marmalade Lane, which I'm sure you know really well, in Cambridge.
Thank you, Amy. The lights will continue to flash, but do carry on.
Great, thank you. Okay, I appreciate these are quite difficult to see, so I'll speak around them. But as I've just alluded to, this primary street, which connects the neighbourhood park and the primary school, has a greenway along it, and these sections are starting to show how that streetscape could work. So you can see the linear greenway on the eastern side of the street. Within it, we'll be planting play opportunities, footpaths meandering through the space, and also cycleways, which will be incorporated into the streetscape. So how these are incorporated is up for discussion, and it's something that we are kind of engaging on as part of this round of engagement. We'll be putting it forward as part of the public engagement as well. The two options are a bi-directional cycleway on one side of the road, which will sit next to the greenway. It will be separated from the carriageway by the presence of a swale. And then on the other side of the road, there would just be a footway. So people would be crossing over, joining the cycleway, and then moving along it in whichever direction they need to travel. The second option is single direction cycleways, one on either side of the road. So on both sides, they'd be separated from the carriageway by either planting or a swale, but they'd be separated in their use. So people would be travelling just in one direction on either side of the road. And this is something we've been having conversations with County Council about, and something that we're eager to hear people's views on if they have them. So we can perhaps come back to that if that's a point of discussion here. So moving on from movement, we've got sport and leisure provision. So we've got the Northern Sports Hub, which sits to the north of the Fays, so connecting the Runway Lake to the Phase 2 water park. And this will be providing courts for netball or tennis, along with the multi-use games area, a sports pavilion, and then different areas of space which could have, tranquil areas for reflection, viewing platforms, which overlook the Runway Lake and the views towards the water park and beyond. We envisage that larger tree planting and landscaping will really enhance the character of this space, and as I say, will frame views both towards the water park and also vice versa towards the Runway Lake to the south. So another option that we are hoping to engage on as part of this round of consultation is how we essentially configure this Northern Sports Hub. We've got two options which you can see here. The yellow arrow, just because I appreciate the labels are quite difficult to read, is essentially long distance views between the Runway Lake, the water park, and to the countryside beyond to the north. We've then got the sports pitches, which you can see there, and in this option they're rotated to align more with the primary street. And the difference between the two really is in the types of open space that are created around the pitches. So we've got a really framed linear space to the north of the Runway Lake here, which frames the views, and then separates out the open space so it could be used for in different ways. So quieter areas for reflection, perhaps, areas for different tree planting, or wilder areas with footpaths passing through. Whereas the second option is a much larger open space, so it's kind of seen as one, and it could be used for different types of activities that perhaps take up more space, and reduces the opportunity to kind of break it up into, as I say, those different uses that's kind of more naturally afforded by aligning the courts with the Runway Lake. In both of these options, there is a really nice, in my opinion, asset, which is the pavilion to the south, which could, for example, have a viewing platform on it, which could overlook the Runway Lake and the pitches. So if you're watching someone playing tennis, you'd also have those amazing views towards the water park to the north and the Runway Lake to the south. So that's kind of a summary of where we are at the moment. As I say, we've had a number of conversations with Luke and his team as well on this to reach where we are today, and really interested to hear your thoughts on where we're up to. Just in terms of the project timeline, we've got here, we're running all the way from the Phase 3A outline planning application. End of last year, we started preparing the design code, and we're obviously now here in the first round of engagement. So as part of this round of engagement, we've obviously got the session today. We've got a public drop-in session this Friday at the Western Pavilion in Northstowe. And we've also got a series of events with various stakeholders, Northstowe Town Council and community groups as well. And we'll be engaging on the material that we've shared with you today. We'll then have a second round of engagement where we'll be speaking to you again later on this year before the submission of the design code and the final opportunity to formally comment, which will be winter of this year or spring of next year. So moving forwards, we've got kind of rough timeframes here. So detailed design and reserve matters will be looking to be progressed to 25 to 26, and then Phase 3A beginning on site, potentially 26 to 27. So thank you for that. I appreciate it's quite a lot of information, but can flip back through the slides, in accordance with any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And before we move on to any questions, can I just ask Vanessa to advise us about how, because the developers have asked us for views of opinions on options, can I ask you how we should best handle that? Because we are very clear that we should not be expressing preferences. So can you explain how we handle that, please?
So I'm very keen that no member puts themselves in a difficult position. This matter will come before committee at some point for determination. So expressing a view, well, the inference from that view could be that you're predetermined or biased, even if that's not what you intend. So I'm not keen on you expressing views. I am happy for you to ask, seek questions of clarification, but that's it. Team, thank you for your presentation, but I will not allow the committee to be drawn either way. That is not the purpose of your presentation.
Thank you, Vanessa. I suspected you would say that. So, members, so just to remind you, we can ask questions of clarification, but the reason for not expressing a preference is that we don't want to appear to be predetermined one way or another, or even predisposed one way or another. But we're perfectly entitled to ask questions of clarification. So, members, do you have any questions for the developers? Oh, sorry, Luke. Sorry, do go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, it just might be helpful just to put things in context as well. So it's as to the purpose and the value of this member briefing as well. So it's now sitting within, this member briefing sits within a period of engagement that Homes England have described. And so, yeah, the public engagement event on Friday, for example. So obviously it's really helpful for members to see what it is that people are going to be asked for views on. So, members can help residents, other stakeholders in the area who might wish to engage in that engagement process. So, that's sort of the value of it, I think. So it's, even if you're not able to express views at this stage, that awareness will be helpful for that broader engagement exercise.
And also, can I just ask, are the residents who are attending those public events, they're being asked about their preferences for the options that you've proposed?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. They don't necessarily have to put a preference forward. It's just opinions on, the different
But you're
kind of
asking them
opportunities.
about
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine. Did you have something you were asking me?
No, you asked for questions.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, right. Okay, members. So I have a couple, but I can kick off if you'd like. But I can wait until others. So, Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Dr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Yes, lots of information in there.
Councillor Hawkins. you need to put your microphone in the direction
because
that
I
you're
faced
speaking. Yes.
through you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll face this way, shall I? Just wanted to check. I didn't quite hear the figure for the density.
That was one of my questions.
Sorry, as I said, maybe my hearing is just going. But,
Okay. Councillor Hawkins, I will add my question to yours because I was going to ask the same thing. You said there were 1,600 dwellings and the density of 15 per hectare, and I wanted 50 per hectare or 15 per hectare? Because I wanted to ask, does that include the green space in your calculation of density?
So it's 50 dwellings per hectare.
Okay, it's difficult to
So
see
your
that.
question, Councillor? Yeah, do
Just
carry on.
one more thing. It's to do with it. I mean, there was a lot of talk about the trees and greenways and stuff, but the whole thing looks like it's in patches. Is there a landscape map that actually shows all the landscaping potentially that is being planned? Because otherwise it just looks sparse to me.
So I will come back on the density issue, but do you have a landscape map?
Yes, so it's a really good point, and it's something that we are working on. So there will be, much like this framework plan, there will be a landscape plan showing the hierarchy of the different spaces. As you say, we've zoomed in and out of the key spaces at the moment, but it is something that we are putting together. I don't have it to hand, unfortunately, today, but it is something that will form the design code, and it's something we can show you in the next round of engagement. So it's a really good point, and it's something that we are working to include.
Thank you. Was that all your question? Thank you. Can I come back on the point of density? Because you said it's a compact neighbourhood, and then I heard 15, which doesn't sound very compact to me. So can I just ask, does your calculation of density include the green space and the lake in the calculation?
Sorry, no, it just includes the residential blocks.
Just the built space. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Members, we've got, I think, Councillor Redrop, you had a question, and then I've got Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. My question was about the cycle routes, and you showed two different options, with one with both directions on the same path and one with the separate paths on either side. I just wondered what the impact of those two different options was on kind of how cyclists continue their routes. Like if they have to keep crossing over the road, does that make it more difficult to use the double cycleway, or how we can't see how it connects to kind of understand whether cyclists will actually use it or if they'll stay on the road, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm going to pass you over to Maddie, who's our transport colleague on this one.
I should say, you joined us later, so would you like to introduce yourself formally?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Maddie Davis. I'm with Arcadis, so we're supporting on infrastructure and transport. So in terms of the cycle path routes, both options align with guidance set out in LTN 120, which is best practice currently in terms of cycle connectivity for new developments and even retrofitting in existing spaces. The reason we've looked at two options is because in this particular instance where we've got the greenway next to the road, we were quite keen to move cyclists into that green space and away from the road. But it is something that we have been talking to the Highway Authority about in terms of how it will work, crossing points, and we are in the process of designing up the whole corridor in a bit more detail to show those crossing points and how you'll get connectivity as a cyclist, whether you come from the south side of the primary street or the north side. I mean, similar to footways, really, there will be set crossing points, and whether you need to cross the road to go into the green space, maybe you cycle along the carriageway if you're a bit of a more confident cyclist. if you're not, it may be that you come out of your house and you go to the nearest crossing point. They will be frequent. We also want to keep the traffic flows slow within this corridor, so whilst it's the primary street, we are aiming for 20 miles per hour. So I think that will come forward in due course, but we don't have that to show you at the moment.
I think it might be helpful if you could illustrate a couple of journeys, so to respond to Councillor Redrup's request, to indicate whether it's likely that people would use the cycle path depending on the option. I think it might be helpful. Councillor Richard Williams.
Excuse me, thank you very much, Chair. I just got two questions really. The first one is about housing mix. I didn't see any information on that, so is that something that's likely to come later in terms of the proposed mix of housing, you know, 1, 2 bed, 3 bed, 4 bed, in this phase? My second question is a bit more specific. On one of the slides, you talked about the route to the primary school, that there wouldn't be a direct car access. People would have to drive around. I'm just wondering what work informs that decision about school. I assume the intention is to reduce car journeys, but of course there's always the option that all you end up doing is diverting traffic down residential streets. So I'm just wondering what work informs what I presume to be the intention, which is that it would reduce journeys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll start with your second question and then I'll pass over to my colleague on your first question. So you're right in that the intention is to promote walking and cycling, and doing that from the outset I think is a really important principle that we want to kind of embed in all of our design as it comes forward. We've got, in terms of accessibility, we do have some parking provided for people with, you know, compromised accessibility, or, you know, teachers or whoever it may be. So there is a small amount of provision provided there. We have had a few discussions around this with the Highways Authority, because it is an interesting point in terms of, you say, clogging up residential streets isn't something we necessarily want to do. And the design of the primary street is being done in such a way so as to stop people from just essentially lining the streets and dropping their children off there. So what we are thinking of, although it's not kind of resolved at this stage, is potentially providing, if I pull up, I don't know how to move my... So I'm just going to move the Teams window so I can actually point to where I can't. The block to the south of the primary school, which hopefully you can make out without me pointing at it, where it says entrance to Northstowe, potentially providing some kind of loop within there, but it's a work in progress at the moment, but the intention is very much not to provide masses of car parking from the outset, because it kind of embeds in a way of life that we don't want to promote in the development. But as I say, it's a work in progress, and it's discussions that we're having at the moment. In terms of the house mix, I'm just going to pass over to Katya on that one.
Okay, yeah, thank you. In terms of the housing mix, we will be guided by the outline consent, which is 40% affordable housing, for example, and the mix across phase 3A. In terms of the design code, similar to the phase 2 code, we are not going to prescribe an exact mix of housing. That will come through the reserved matters application, but the way the urban form is set up and the density calculations have been done, that there's, I mean, the highest percentage is on housing, family housing, the kind of urban typologies, with a kind of smaller percentage of flats. So it's not going to be lots and lots of 5-story blocks of flats, because we know that's not Northstowe, and they will be going into the town centre, if at all. So the high percentage is on terrace housing, family housing, but the code in itself will not, I mean, we don't expect to set a mix at this point.
Does that answer your question about what was the thinking behind the principle?
In part, I suppose my concern is that, you know, having trudged around Northstowe actually quite a lot over the last 4 weeks, There are a lot of cars in North Stowe, and they're parked everywhere. So I do just slightly worry that whilst the intention, I think, is a good intention, all you actually end up doing is diverting traffic around, streets. If there isn't any work to actually lead us, I mean, the intention is to cut journeys, but is there any evidence it will actually cut journeys, I suppose is what I was getting at, but maybe that's a difficult question to answer, but I think I've probably made my point now.
Thank you. One question related to that might be, have you planned a traffic management plan? Because I know this is design code, but in other areas we've found it very necessary to establish a traffic management plan for new developments, such that the problem that Councillor Williams expressed doesn't cause a problem later on. Okay, Councillor Fane.
Sorry, can I come back on that point?
Yeah, do come back.
So on those 2 points, we are working very closely with the Highway Authority about transportation, how they're seeing it work within other developments as well, taking on board their advice on how they think it will work well with North Stowe being a new development. Do understand your point about cars, especially in phase 1 where the cycle routes are not surfaced yet, so maybe those sustainable options are not as clear as they could be. But if you then drive around the parts of phase 2 that have been delivered, those cycle links are a lot clearer. Parking is not encouraged on those routes. Those are through routes, and that is something that we want to take forward into phase 3 as well. As the development progresses, then there will be further sustainable travel options, which reduces your reliance on cars, which I think in phase 1 there is still quite a high reliance on cars. There is a approved transport assessment which looks at how we can encourage people to cycle and walk more, especially with internal trips where the distances are not great. So if you live locally to the school, encouraging you to walk to the school or cycle rather than driving your car. And there's also a travel plan in place. So what I would add to that are there are conditions associated with the consent that do require us to pull together further travel plan details, so that will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Maddie. I note that, for example, a travel plan has been necessary to apply to Darwin Green, for example, because it caused a problem. Okay, so over to Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come to what I see as the elephant in the room, the announcement by the Chancellor, North Stowe, one of a number of towns where development is to be speeded up. You helpfully gave us an indication, and I accept it was just an indication of timeline, starting phase A 26-27. But bearing in mind that Homes England is am I right, an NDPB rather than a government agency? Anyway, let's not worry about the status of it. You will be wanting to take account of that. I think a lot of expectations are that the concern at North Stowe relates to community facilities, which you mentioned as a possibility for the area north of the neighbourhood square, I think. But two things. Do you think that you will be able to be a little more specific about what community facilities you might be able to include, or will it have to come at a later stage? And secondly, do you think that the pressure you may face to speed things up might affect the process of the design code?
Thank you. Yes, Dean.
Thank you. In terms of community facilities, you can see on the plan that Amy's got on the screen there, the neighbourhood centre for phase 3A lies immediately southwest of this key phase, so it's outside this key phase. But Amy will flip to another plan where we are incorporating mixed-use zones where complementary non-residential uses are encouraged. So they're highlighted on the screen. And kind of in the background here, as well as looking to bring phase 3A, key stage 1 forward, we will be continuing to deliver phase 2, including the town centre for Northstowe, in partnership with the District Council, who are delivering, for example, the important civic hub. There is a sort of wider plan to bring those community facilities forward. And in terms of that sort of wider plan, we will be sharing some announcements soon in relation to the phase 2 town centre and an exciting new development partner. And also on a smaller scale, an exciting proposition around co-housing within phase 2 that incorporates elements of community facility. So I think those facilities will be accommodated both within phase 3A, but also in phase 2 within the town centre and its immediate environments. And we see phase 2 and phase 3A Key Stage 1 as complementing one another. Phase 2, as Ketcher suggested, is the town centre. It's likely to be higher density, higher proportion of apartments. Phase 3A Key Stage 1 is lower density, mainly houses. So we see those as complementary, and we're able to bring those two forward together, because they complement one another. They offer something slightly different and provides kind of variety in terms of the kind of housing we can bring forward to the market.
Thank you. Can I just ask, have you considered at all temporary community facilities until such time as that next phase gets built? We know how important that has been at Northstowe.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, and we have identified a location within phase 2 where we are looking to bring those forward. It's outside the scope of the design code in 3A, but we are looking to bring space forward for temporary uses. Spring next year, essentially, is the timetable we've set ourselves.
Could you indicate on the plan, because you're talking about phase 2.
That's right.
So you're saying there might be temporary space for community use in phase 2, but that's not. Remind me where that sits with your planning, your build-out.
So phase 2 is to the north of the area that we've been focusing on today. It includes the secondary college that's already delivered and operational, and the site we've identified is within what will be the future town centre opposite the secondary college. But its timescale and its delivery is kind of outside the phase 3A Key Stage 1 area and time frame that we've been talking about today, which, as Amy's pointed out, is kind of sort of several years before we can get to start this. That the design code is the first step. I think it's important to highlight also that there is this kind of loose partnership arrangement with the District Council, who are important in phase 1 in terms of delivering the community facilities within the local centre and the local centre itself. So we are in frequent contact with officers around plans for phase 1, so that phase 2, 3A don't conflict or compete with phase 1, but complement what may be planned within phase 1.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin Khan.
Within my ward is Orchard Park, which has been a considerable problem with car parking, as in the same way that Councillor Williams noted. So I'm interested to know how you're providing for car parking within the. I know you're trying to promote sustainable transport. There will be some cars. How are you proposing to provide for car parking within the development? And secondly, the density of 50 per hectare, I assume that includes roads as well, but not open spaces, or is it just the actual built-up area? It's quite a high density in any case. So that I was wondering what provision, what the garden, open space, private space provision is for the development with it, since it's mainly, you're talking mainly about being terraced houses rather than flats which don't have space. I just wonder what the provision is.
So in terms of the density, we have excluded the strategic open spaces and the primary and secondary streets. So it includes the residential, the smaller residential streets, and then the development plots. In terms of the development form, it is terrace houses, private gardens, family typologies we have seen in and around Cambridge coming forward. In terms of the car parking, we are setting out to meet car parking standards, but incorporating that in a way that allows a little bit more flexibility as well. For example, kind of making use of car barns and clustering car parking, so they're not all, so we don't end up with lots of kind of semi-detached houses with car parking on plot, because that really restricts the densities and the environments we can create. So it's not looking to reduce the standards, it's just incorporating car parking in different ways. So people have, we want to create an environment where people can choose to take the bike. It's not forcing people to not have cars. It's providing an additional choice of taking, you know, walking or cycling. Does that help?
And Councillor Khan, did you want to come back?
Yes, I understand that. In fact, the parking, one of the problems in Orchard Park is parking on pavements, and parking on the street makes it less attractive for cyclists because it's an obstruction. So I'm interested to hear about that. The other aspect that is interesting, I don't know if it's really design code or whether it's later in the actual detailed design, but have you considered how you manage the minor residential roads and the open spaces? Are you looking towards a management company or passing it to the district council? What had you planned in terms of that management? We've had problems in other areas with, it depends upon the management company, but we have had problems with management companies. For instance, to give an example, in Orchard Park, we recently found out that for the last 15 years, the street lights on the areas managed by the management companies have never been connected. People have been complaining for years that they weren't working. And it's only finally that we managed to get them out to look at it. So there may be problems, and we just wondered what the management, how you plan the management of these areas.
Can you respond to that?
Yes, Chair. In terms of stewardship, the design code doesn't prescribe a model of stewardship, but we have started a work looking across the Homes England estate, phase 2, 3A and 3B, as to what the options are and what the best option is. There's a planning requirement for that to be agreed with the local planning authority, so I suspect that will come back to you. But we're looking at a full range of options, from kind of management companies to the town council / district council to trusts, etc. So that work is ongoing, and it's important to Homes England that these spaces are well managed, because we're looking to build out over the next kind of 20 years and need a sort of good environment to be selling homes in, so that people want to live in the area and developers want to build in the area. So it's kind of in our interest to do that. I appreciate that's limited sort of reassurance. I think the main assurance is that the stewardship arrangements will come back to you for approval.
Very much, Dean. That's really helpful. So just a couple of questions from me. Oh, sorry, Luke. Oh.
Sorry, is that okay? Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things which has been discussed. So yeah, that's absolutely right what Dean just described there. I think something that you might find helpful to understand in terms of how it relates to the design code is, while the design code itself doesn't specify who would be maintaining each space, we are trying to think of that when thinking about how places are designed. So the school square is an example. So it's trying to think, actually, from experience, we think that the school might not be interested in maintaining that school square. So it's kind of designing that in such a way that it would be developed by someone else and then also maintained in accordance with those arrangements that are still to be decided, but by some other body that would have a longer term interest. So it's that kind of thing. So it is, of course, very relevant to the code. And I'd say also what you're seeing today is some early kind of sort of master plan level stuff coming into a little bit of detail in places. But what will arrive, or what will emerge through this process, this is quite early in the process, will be a full code with lots of detail, and some of that will be on, say, the car parking that you just were asking as well. And they actually gave you an idea as to the direction of travel, pardon the pun perhaps. But the code itself will look at how the parking standards are built into the design, and it would use, while it doesn't, the code can't design all the residential parcels that will come forward in detail by different house builders. It would include diagrams and things and different ways in which parking can be provided to an appropriate standard. So it is all to come, but it's, you know, it's all quite phased even within the code itself.
Thank you. Could I just, I have a couple of questions. With these cycleways that are aligned with either roads or pavements, footways, can I ask what your principle is about segregation? Are they all segregated cycleways, segregated from pedestrian paths?
Whether along the primary streets, yes they are. So we wanted to create a safe space for pedestrians and a separate space for cyclists, so that can accommodate both recreational cyclists as well as commuter cyclists.
And what about where they aren't on primary streets? I remember you saying some of them are across open space, as it were, not aligned. What's the principle there? I know you're trying to follow LTN 120, so just wanted to ask whether there's a principle of segregation where you can.
In the green open spaces, there is a principle of segregation where we can, yes.
Okay,
on some of the more local streets where you'll have less or fewer people cycling and walking, it may be that on tertiary streets they're not segregated, but on the key routes that you've seen through the development, where they're key routes across the development, where we can, yes, they'll be segregated.
Yes, it can be quite alarming as a pedestrian to be walking along what appears to be a between houses footpath and have a cycle go past you. So some kind of indication is always helpful, but I'm sure you've got that in mind if you've been looking at LTM 120. The last question I have is, can I ask that you've considered maximising the proportion of adoptable roads wherever possible? Because I'm concerned if one doesn't do that, then a larger proportion of roads end up having to be maintained by the residents of the development. So have you given that some consideration?
The short answer is yes. We are talking to the Highway Authority about the strategy for adoption of roads, and as you say, the primary and secondary streets will definitely be offered for adoption, and we're talking to them about the strategy for tertiary streets, but that will come forward as part of the detailed design by developers for smaller parcels.
I appreciate the County Council put some some requirements on the adoptability of roads, which sometimes can conflict with the wish to make the maximum adoptable. It puts quite high demands on them. So can I ask that you have considered maximising building to an adoptable standard? On your, for example, on your secondary streets?
Yeah, I think it's primary, secondary streets, as Maddie said, certainly, and I think we're trying to maximise the areas that can be adopted. And we are continuing to have that conversation with district officers and also pushing the highway authorities, because we're also quite keen to integrate things like play streets or cycle streets. And they will so far, most certainly not be adopted from all the kind of feedback we've had. we will keep pushing, but we are very mindful about wanting also to create different environments in the streets. So I think it will end up probably with a balance, but we push to get things adopted as much as possible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corin Garvey. Just one moment. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Garvey? Yes, but you can't because your microphone's not working. Okay, so perhaps Erin can come and help you first.
You might want to take Jimmy Hawkins.
Yes, I thought. We've got Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Martin Khan. Okay, so Corin's got another microphone. Thank you.
I was going to ask about community facilities, and I wondered if there were plans for preschool education, like a nursery school with an outside space.
As set out, established in the outline planning, the primary schools do include a provision for early years as well.
Okay.
And also the kind of the awareness that there's a need for nurseries, particularly in early years when young families move in, was another driver for creating these flexible mixed-use spaces if somebody wants to set up a nursery more privately and commercially, so that can happen as well as the need arrives. But yeah, it's catered for.
Can I ask another one?
Do go ahead.
That's quite a few community groups, like thinking of scouting and guiding, has the need for a hall, but also outside space for activities. Will that be providing that sort of facility?
I mean, when we planned phase 3A at the outline stage, it was looked at in context of the whole town, so that the whole town is catered for with all the various the scouts and brownies and football and all the different sports. In this particular key phase, there's the space that Amy mentioned in the northern, next to the tennis courts, for example. There is space for more natural space, and it's not designed yet, and that's part of the engagement happening also on Friday with the community of what they would like to see in those spaces as well as the neighbourhood park.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Jimmy Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. Three things. I just want a very quick question on this. The Nostell was envisioned as a healthy new town. Presumably your designs are still taking that vision into account, or not?
Yes, yeah, they are.
Okay, in which case, the idea of healthy is not just, how you feel, it's your well-being, mental, how you get to work, etc., which means, if I can go back to Councillor Williams's question about the drop-off for school. Parents need to get to work. And I just wondered if, in the practical terms, yes, on paper, in planning terms, might look fine, but practically might not be healthy for those who have to go through it. So how does your design for the school square meet with that vision of making life healthy enough for people to live there, work there, study there, and play there?
I'll start off with answering this and then I might pass on to others. I think it's a balance, isn't it? Because I think the school square offers a healthy opportunity for people to meet their neighbours, meet their, that important social interaction, which I think could, quite often these days, is kind of negated with people just driving up. And I understand parents have to get to work. I'm the parent, I completely get it. But I think there's a balance to be struck between creating the opportunity for social interaction, creating the space for children to come out, socialise with their peers, with their parents, have that play space, and also be able to cycle to school safely. I think that's one side of the kind of, you know, physical health, mental health, everything. I also understand the need for parents, and I think that's part of the conversations we're having at the moment with, like I said, potentially the block to the south of the school. It's not going to be that it's impossible for people to drop their children off by car. It's just not the first thing that we're designing for. The priority is for cycling and walking. It will be possible, but it's just not, the priority is given to others. So I think, like I said, the conversations are happening with the county council at the moment. There's the potential for the loop in the residential block to the south of this, so people can drop their children off and walk what will be quite a short distance. But it's just not going to be the foremost priority in the design, but it will be possible.
Okay,
I hope that.
sorry to cut in.
Yeah.
You talk about engaging with the county council. Are you engaging with the town council?
Yeah.
Who have already seen the experience in phase 1?
Yeah, so we've got a session set up with them in the next couple of weeks, actually, where we'll be engaging on this material as well. So we'll have their feedback from this, in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, thank you. And last one, if I may, Chair. Actually, you took the question out of my list almost. It's about the adoptable roads. I'm emphasizing this because I am currently dealing with issues on to do with the additional management charges that residents in new developments have to pay on top of the council tax. And frankly, it is getting ridiculous. I mean, some of them are paying almost half as much for management charges as they are for council tax. And this is because of this thing we now have of management companies. This is Homes England. Homes England, I would hope, will be setting good examples. It's not just maximizing, the adoptable roads and whatever else it is. It's making it, coming back to that standard. It's the practical things. And we are the ones who end up getting the crap because people go, well, we're paying council tax, you're not doing this, and you're asking us to pay more. I'm sorry.
Be mindful of your language.
I know, I'm sorry. But can you please not just maximize, but make it the standard? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I think you've heard the plea there. And it's the reason I was asking about adoptable roads is because it's not only, of course, the roads that are not built to an adoptable standard, but it's also often the green spaces that need to be maintained by these communities. And it is costly. I have one in my own village, which is, it's a considerable additional cost. I would also like to pursue, I will come to Councillor Williams, I just wanted to also check with you about the school drop-off. Absolutely, I understand exactly what you're saying about what you want to encourage, the behaviours you want to encourage, but what I am really concerned is how will you manage the situation if, for example, because we see it at Marley, what will you do if you find parents stopping on that corner, under the trees, on the edge of the curb, and dropping off children at the most convenient point for them, not the most convenient point for everybody else, but what will you do if you encounter that? That's why I asked about a transport plan, because I think, have you a plan for that, and how will you discourage that sort of behaviour?
In the first instance, what we were thinking in terms of the cross sections that we showed you, are we able to bring those road sections up? Where in phase 1 and 2, the cycleways sit on the edge of the carriageway, and I think you've seen in phase 1, people will pull up onto the cycleway to park and block that cycleway. So taking into account what we've learnt from that and also current best practice, we're looking at having the segregation of the cycleway away from the carriageway, having that planted green space to discourage people from pulling off the carriageway and parking. So that's number one. I think what I was hearing is your concern that people will just stop on the carriageway outside of the school.
If you could show the slide of the school square. Not that one, that one, yes. My observation is I think you might find that people might try and park on that eastern side.
Yeah, that is something that we are still looking into the detail of, so we'll take on board your comments on that and we'll speak to the Town Council and the County Council.
Can I refer you to Marley?
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Williams and Councillor Martin Khan. If you
Coming back again, you referred to the making provision for co-housing. I mean, I'm within my Orchard Park lies within my ward, and so Marmalade Lane lies, and it's been a very successful development. And there was comments that there was among people there that there's a shortage of spaces. It's difficult to find. This will be as far as I can make out, the first time that it's proposed that we make provision for co-housing in our developments. How will that come into the design code? Will it just be a statement that you should make provision for it, or will you actually allocate an area? I just wondered how you'll incorporate it, because obviously, without expressing an opinion, my experience has been good.
Well, that's really fantastic and positive to hear. And when we make the announcement shortly, I think the development partner we're in discussions with will be very familiar to you. So that will hopefully be good news. The site identified was within phase 2. Apologies to confuse you. So it's to the north of the area that we're focusing on today. The way that co-housing is delivered is essentially there is an architect appointed to work with interested residents to produce a design that in that instance would work with the design code for phase 2. So it delivers a kind of holistic scheme, if you like, that the residents are happy with. It includes a communal space, etc. We would expect the same to be applied within this design code, that the design code sets the parameters, and that a co-housing scheme would be expected to kind of sit within those.
Fine, thank you very much. And Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points. The first one, you probably have seen this, but I did just want to draw your attention to a really interesting piece of work that was done by the Cambridge Biomedical Campus recently, where they did a survey of people who work on the campus, and they looked at their housing preferences. And actually the 2 top housing preferences for people working on the biomedical campus site were a garden, 76%, and parking, 72%. I think when we're designing new towns, we really need to design them with evidence about what people actually want in mind. And this does feed into the point the number of us have made about the way people really live their lives. And, access to that school in particular. I do slightly worry that it's the folly of central planning. This is how we want people to live our lives. And we design things according to what we've decided, or rather what, has been decided as how people should live their lives, but is not necessarily actually how people will choose to live their lives. And this idea of a sort of rigid, and it does sound quite ideological, hierarchy, that we're going to prioritise walking and cycling, so we're going to make it damn difficult for you to drive to that school. Doesn't mean people won't. Sorry, I've done it again. Apologies.
You need to be careful.
Apologies.
Yes.
We're going down the scale.
So we've heard the point. I think
we don't go
Councillor
too far down
Williams,
this line.
we've heard the point that you've made. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I don't see any further questions. And I'd like to thank you for your presentation and for listening to our questions and providing answers to them. So thank you very much indeed. I'd like to ask if the members would stay, but thank you very much. It's been very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll bring that to a close at 11:24. Thank you. And if you would go offline. Is there anything else? We have other matters on our agenda. Thank you.
I suggest we have a brief adjournment, members, just a comfort break for 5 minutes and we'll come back. Thank you. Thank you. Right, members, thank you. We're rejoining the meeting at 11:37. So we're on item 5, the compliance report. Number 5 on our agenda. I'd like to note that this was published as a supplement and is not part of our main agenda pack. And hello, Christopher Braybrook. Thank you for joining us online to present the report and answer any questions we may have. Chris, would you like to make your presentation, please?
Good afternoon. Oh, sorry. Good morning, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Just got a few updates for the committee this month. Some important ones around updates to the service delivery and members of the team. I at the last committee report advised that we were looking to recruit, obviously, into the vacant position of Principal Planning Compliance Officer. We've obviously completed that recruitment and we've appointed a very experienced officer who is a qualified planner. So we anticipate the start date of the 9th of September. Contracts have gone out. I think it's just sort of a formality now. Some of the rest of the paperwork's been sorted out. I'll be able to sort of advise a bit more on that and hopefully introduce you to that member of staff at some point after they start in September. We've also changed the team structure following consultation with the team. In my report, I've provided the previous team structure diagram with myself and then the principal officer, 3 seniors, and then a compliance officer post as well. The structure has been changed to reflect the development management teams, East and West, which you will hopefully be familiar with. With a principal officer post in each team, senior officer, a compliance officer, and then the new planning apprentice, which I'll come on to shortly as well. The reason for this change is to kind of integrate and be closer working with our development management colleagues in a kind of East and West format. Also, so that kind of we have a team structure rather than individuals working for the compliance team. With the anticipation that the team know more of the issues, the compliance issues and cases that are going on, closer working, and hopefully resolve cases more quickly. The second principal compliance officer post has been created through secondment for a 1-year period to see how this new structure works. Following the 1 year, we will review the structure, how it's working, how the processes have it improved or not, and then look to either continue that secondment for a further period of time, make that post permanent, or alternatively go back to where we were before or something new, just on the outcome of that. So there was an internal application process for that secondment, and Alistair Funge, who is a senior officer, was successful in that and has moved into his principal compliance role at the beginning of this month. In terms of the planning compliance apprentice, we've been successful in recruiting into that post. We're just sort of waiting for the paperwork for that, and we anticipate that officer will be in post prior to September, and then starting their planning degree at Southbank University in London. So that's the update on staffing. The figures that have been provided at Appendix 2 last month in my report, I advised the committee that there were some problems with some of those statistics just from carrying out the work to add priorities to the older cases, as was requested by Heather Williams. That does seem to have sorted itself out now, and the stats are better than they were. We now have 500 of the 700 cases that are currently open linked to a priority, A, B or C. We've linked them all to their priorities rather than just the A that Councillor Williams requested. There's still some 200 cases where the priority can still not be assigned, and we're working through. That's due to issues with unique property reference numbers and linking to older file types. We continue to work on this and try and get the remainder of them assigned a priority. but it's anticipated, obviously, as we move forward, that case number will reduce further each month. That may still have an effect on some of the statistics for a first visit, unfortunately, whereby it looks like some visits have taken a very long time to take place. It's just the way that the information was previously inputted onto our systems, and how the reporting software uses that information. But it will eventually, hopefully, sort itself out. And obviously we'll provide further updates on that as and when we can. And then in terms of notices, there's just one notice that's been issued last month, and that's in relation to an untidy site, whereby the condition of the site was having an adverse effect on the amenity of the area. And that's my update for this month.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very much appreciate that. A couple of questions from me. Good to see that you're responding to the needs of compliance in the area, and you've revised the structure into a team structure. Can I ask when you plan to review whether that is the right thing to do? You know, are you going to sort of formalise when you plan to review that structure?
Yeah, so that secondment is obviously a 12-month period. Rebecca and myself will look at that towards the end. We haven't actually set a specific date yet, but we will look at that towards the end of that secondment to see how it's working and how this team structure meets the needs of the service.
Okay, thank you. And the second one was on page 10. There's it's like the second thing up from the bottom. It says average time in days taken from receipt of a complaint by the compliance team to file creation and acknowledgement sent. And it says the target is 3 days. And I just wanted to check whether the stats quoted at priority B and C are correct. They're 0.22 days. In other words, it suggests a couple of hours to do it. Is that actually right? It was fantastic if it is.
So they're done daily, basically. So when new cases come in, I look at them daily. There might be the odd case that's the following day. I have a situation in place whereby if I'm on annual leave, Rebecca picks up those new case assignments. So yeah, we are dealing with them really quickly. As you're aware, we have the priority A, Bs and Cs in place, and obviously the amount of time that takes to make up a file would have an impact on that as well. Certainly for the more severe cases that come in as well, we need to get out and do those visits in a timely manner.
If I can just jump in on that as well, that's also part of the new process that we put in place earlier this year. So Chris now has a dedicated resource within the technical support team who register the complaints, and once Chris has allocated it to an officer, they deal with the acknowledgements. That was one of the things that we wanted to improve upon is getting acknowledgements and getting information out as soon as possible after receiving a complaint.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you, Chris. I'm delighted that is a correct statistics. Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the new team structure and the current capacity, just about the West team in particular, because my understanding is that we don't yet have the principal officer or the apprentice, so it might just be one officer. So I just wondered if that's working okay and if there's any extra capacity available for them.
We are currently in the transition period into the East and West. So we're kind of moving our way through that to sort of be in place for the beginning of September fully. As we move across, I'm picking up kind of the responsibility for the principal officer in the West team and assisting Nick more than the other officers. Alistair's role now is to support the members in his team with workloads, what they're doing, advice on how to move things forwards. So I am helping Nick, although I don't see the new structure being a weakness when the new principal officer moves into role. As I sort of said, it's an extremely experienced officer that's coming to us with good knowledge and understanding of the planning system. I think, Nick will be well supported, as will be the apprentice within the West team as well.
Thank you very much, Christopher.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. It sounds like the recruitment's going well, which is great. And I did just want to say, I don't know if I've said this before, but I really appreciate the way that the statistics are set out now in terms of priority A, B, and C, and it's all broken down. And I think that's really good progress in allowing us to sort of understand what's going on. And it sounds like the team is working very hard. I know I have asked this question before, and this is not to criticise the team, because I know they're working very hard, and I think the new structures and the transparency is all great stuff, and it all seems to be going in a good direction. But the number of cases that are over 6 months old has gone up this month from last month, and there is quite a backlog there. And whilst the recruitment's going well, I think probably with the best will in the world, it's going to be difficult for the team to clear that and keep up with the current workload. So I suppose my question is partly, is there a sort of programme to bring that backlog down, and when do you think it would, we'd likely see those backlog figures starting to fall? I appreciate Chris probably can't answer this, so this is probably more of a statement than a question, but I mean, I do wonder if there's a case for some short-term support for the planning enforcement team to clear that backlog in terms of getting some agency workers in for a short period to help clear that. But I don't expect Chris to comment on that. But in terms of the fall in, when we could expect that backlog to fall, that would be useful to get some indication.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Did you want to respond to that, Christopher?
Can do. There is a currently we were working on a plan to deal with the workloads that we've got, the backlog that we have, but it is in the initial planning stages at this moment in time. There are other local planning authorities that have carried out similar exercises. In terms of timescale, it will take a while in order to clear a backlog. You know, we need to review each case and make a decision on what we do with it based on expediency. If we're going to close cases or move forwards to reduce that backlog, we need to be really clear in our decision-making process and why we do it, because we are accountable to those decisions, you know, and the people that have made complaints to us. What I would say is as well, in terms of numbers, which was picked up on, that the cases has kind of, you know, gone up older than 6 months. There is still quite a lot of new cases coming in. My initial, I'm just kind of looking at it year on year now. It would appear to me that given the caseload we've got, we would probably be slightly higher than last year's 799 new referrals by probably a small margin, not a huge amount, but it will be more. But the processes we put in place in the last sort of 6 months with setting up new files and having the dedicated resource that Rebecca spoke about in setting up new files, we have less duplicate files this year. As you're all aware, you put a complaint on the system, it generates a new case straight away for us, rather than us going in and putting everything in, so it exists straight away. The technical support officer who's been dealing with then actioning those new referrals as they come in for me to allocate, where there is duplicates, they are now being dealt with. So where there was probably more duplicates last year, there's certainly not the same amount this year. So actually work levels are going up as well, which is something we need to kind of be aware of as a team. But I'm hoping sort of some of these, you know, streamlining the processes and whatever else will help us deal with these new cases that are coming in as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. Right, okay. So I can't see any. Oh, Councillor Timmy Hawkins. We're still on compliance at the moment.
Yes, we are. Just to say thank you to Chris for the report. I think it's interesting that Councillor Williams has picked up on an increase in workload, or an increase in backlog rather, which is explained by increase in workload. But also, I think if I can refer folks to page 4 of the report, sorry, I'm looking at it separately here. You know, assigning older cases, the request that was made to do that actually caused additional work. So it was a catch-22 loop. You know, we've always said this, you ask for more work to be done, it affects what's already been done. So let's just bear that in mind, please. Okay? The folks are working as hard as they can to get things back in line. And of course, we're going in the right direction at this point in time. So thank you to everyone.
Got Rebecca Smith.
Just to jump in and add to what Chris has said, yes, we're working on changing our structure. We've also formally written down our processes and working on improving those processes as well. And I've been, I don't want to say tapping up, but talking to various other authorities that I have worked at as well and have contacts with in terms of transformation projects that they've undertaken with their compliance teams as well. And only, not last week, the week before, Chris and I spoke to one authority, which we are acquiring some information from this week, and that will probably impact on further changing our processes and hopefully speeding up and looking at different ways of organising the team or different ways of improving our processes. And we're reaching out to as many people as we can to help transform the service and to help improve some of those processing times and to build further upon the improvements that we've made to the performance of the team. And we are operating some interim arrangements at the minute until we have the team fully staffed. But come September, hopefully we'll be able to update you on the changes that we continue to look to improve and changes that we continue to make within the team. And also that should then show within, there's always a slight delay, but hopefully that should show on the performance figures before the end of the year, I would hope. It's work in progress, and we do have a plan, and it does include using some of my time as well to help deal with the backlog cases.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Right, so members, let's now move on to item 6, which is the appeals report. Rebecca, would you like to... sorry, Chris, thank you so much for your report. I thought you were going to be doing appeals, but thank you very much indeed. Rebecca, would you like to move on to appeals?
Yep, it's quite a short report this month. The first part is the decisions that we've received from PINs. There's not many of them, unfortunately. And then just the 4 new appeals that have been received in the last month, and then the ever-increasing list of decisions where we are still waiting an outcome from the Planning Inspectorate. Unfortunately, we still are experiencing delays in getting decisions from them.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. And indeed, that is a worry, isn't it? Because it means that decisions delayed means that the people who've taken action, taken inappropriate development action, feel they're getting away with it for longer and longer and longer. But I appreciate that's not within our gift. We are waiting for the Planning Inspectorate.
Yeah, it's planning application decisions as well as enforcement decisions. The Planning Inspectorate do now have targets which they are seemingly working towards on the newer appeals that they're receiving, but it's the ones that have fallen outside of those targets that appear to be now delayed.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's a statement. We're not the only ones who've got backlogs. Even the Planning Inspectorate has backlogs. But nobody's actually, attacking them.
No. I'm gratified that on our appeals report, mostly it looks to me as if where applicants have appealed our decisions of refusal, they've mostly been dismissed or withdrawn. So can I just ask what a split decision is? There's one at Furze Farms, St Peter Street, Caxton. I just wonder, what does that actually mean, a split decision?
I would need to look at this one in detail to find out exactly what it was, but it usually means that the Inspectorate made a decision, didn't either upheld it or dismiss it, so they could have varied if it was a reason for refusal, they could have varied the reason for refusal. If it was a concern over a condition, I can come back to you, I can have a look at that one in detail and advise what the decision was, but it wasn't, it was against a section 73, so I would have to have a look at it in detail to see what it was, because there was various different elements that were reserved matters on it. So it could be that she approved some but refused others.
Okay, so it's resubmission of a reserved matters application to the design of the approved dwelling and garage. So maybe it was as you say, some elements were okay and some were not.
I'll have a look at it and I'll come back to you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions on the appeals report?
I see none.
No? Okay. Righto, members, so thank you very much. Thank you everybody who was taking part in the meeting, including Christopher Braybrook and the developers and our own officers here. So I'll call the meeting to a close at 11:57 and remind you members that our next meeting is to be held on Wednesday the 14th of August. Can I just ask, is there likely to be a site visit associated with that committee meeting?
I would expect so. I'm on annual leave, so it will be Michael Hammond who's leading the meeting in my absence. But
so
there is likely to be a site visit the week before.
Week before, lovely. Thank you very much. So members, perhaps put a hold in your diaries for the 7th of August. Thank you very much indeed, and I'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you.